Well, we wanted to talk about the debate, right?
I would
Yeah,
say though, my first impression was just horror at both these guys. I mean, within like a few minutes, I'm like, Biden looks like he's about to drop dead, and Trump is nuttier than he's ever been. So that was my overall impression. That was my impression from the first second through the entire thing.
I'm glad I watched it because I normally wouldn't watch this type of thing.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
We were
neither.
at some friend's house and they were like, "Oh, come on over. We'll have dinner and we'll you know drink beer
yeah.
and watch the debates." And it sounded pretty good, so we did that. And they're my friends, my lawyer friends down in Connecticut, so they tend to be much more mainstream, pro Pelosi, pro Hillary, Democrat. So it's interesting conversation and reactions to it, but. Yeah, they were much more focused on Trump's performance, but I thought
Oh yeah.
Biden was also really, you know, I mean, if this is the best we have to offer, it was scary because Biden wasn't that impressive either. Wasn't that impressive at all?
Right.
I,
Oh,
I thought it was pretty interesting how most people obviously were checking in because they just wanted the drama. They wanted the show, right? That's
right.
what really people were checking in for. They weren't really looking to see what the platforms were about or, any sort of policy or anything like that. No, it was just about, like what funny things was Trump going to say? What was he going to call him? All this stuff. And I mean, sure enough, there was name calling. It was dumb and it was just some childish little back and forth that offered nothing to the American public, but except I guess that entertainment, if that's what you checked in for, which again, that's what most people
Right.
did check in for,
But
right?
some platform
Yeah.
issues did actually get brought up, and I don't know if that was intentional or not on Trump's part, but if it was genius. Otherwise, it just happened because he actually got Biden to say, out loud that I'm against the Green New Deal. So they're
So
thereby losing a lot of the
Yeah.
left, potentially left
Well, he
voters who
did
want.
say it, right? He said, "Oh,
and
you
it
just lost the radical left."
Yeah,
Yeah, but I
he
mean
said
that's
he said
true.
that on other points. It was so strange. Biden was going down the path of like defending the Green New Deal, and then Trump specifically asked him, "Then you're for it?" And he specifically said no. It was so strange. I mean, well, maybe I need to rewatch that, but that's what I got was that he was in the process of like defending it, saying,
And
"Oh no,
also
it doesn't mean whatever," and then like Trump, "So you're for it?" "Oh no."
he
What?
came out in support of the police, and that was another thing
Right.
that not saying he does not support defund the police in any way, shape, or form, basically. So I
Oh
thought
yeah.
that only not that this debate really swayed anybody's votes, but if it were going to, I mean, that would be something that would accrue to Trump's side, I think, rather than Biden, because
I think the problem comes into the fact that most people they were just focused on that Trump didn't let Biden talk and and then the whole interactions between him and Chris Wallace and that it was and then on like the Trump side because I tried to see what the reactions were on kind of both sides. To be honest with you, I can't really stomach a lot of what on the left. So I'm hoping that you guys can give a little bit more of that, whatever they were saying on the left perspective. But on the right, at least, they were saying that, that it was a lot of missed opportunities for Trump and that essentially it was a debate between Trump and Biden and Chris Wallace. That they were
Right.
both, jumping on him and harping on him, and obviously they were giving a lot of shit to Chris Wallace, saying that he was a bad moderator. I mean, to be honest with you, I thought it was really dumb how they just kept talking over each other and but that is the point. It's so that they can put on this show and distract so that you're not really thinking about what they should be talking about, right? What they skirted around everything, like
Mm.
what direct questions that were faced to them, they just skirted around them, and you could tell because Chris Wallace, he would just kind of give up in his what like after he would ask a question, he would kind of bait them a little bit. You could tell when he wasn't getting anything, he'd just be like, "All right, good. I gotta
well,
move on."
my wife is a former fourth grade teacher. Now she's a professor of education, but she looked at that and she said, if this happened in a classroom, she would just said, okay, everyone be quiet, put your heads down on your desks, and that it was just like Chris Wallace lost control of the situation. I mean, it was not And
But
obviously
how could he control it?
he,
Yeah,
I mean, he
Really
couldn't.
housing, what's
I
the only thing they
sympathize.
should have done is that they should have, if they really wanted to control it or whatever, they should have muted the
Cut the mics.
microphones.
Right.
Yes.
And then all they would have done is that they would have yelled.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I'm
Yeah.
sure that that's
Yeah.
what would have happened.
I kept thinking that, like, you know, where the rest of the world watched us the way we would watch, you know, some Panama legislature throwing chairs at each other or something, you know, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if Panama's the right one. Who's the one that every once in a while you see that kind of stuff happen, right?
Well, I think there were these fights, like in, I don't know, it was in the Ukrainian parliament or whatever,
Yeah,
someplace,
yeah.
you know, wherever there's like fist fights. And actually, the
Right.
last time that happened was, you know, before the Civil War in Congress. It was actually that famous case where the senator beat another member of
Yeah, that's
Congress
right.
with a cane.
With his
I can't
cane,
remember.
yeah.
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 So, you know,
Yeah.
we're, and that wasn't, you know, televised live on CNN, but
I will say that I wish that Trump had said a few things instead of just like snide little remarks while Biden was talking. If he'd actually said them out loud and bold, like there were cases where Biden was making the case, well, 200,000 people are dead from COVID, and then Trump just said under his breath, well, there's more than that from Iraq and Libya, from, you know, from your wars and things like that. And it's like, man, if he had just made that point big and bold, that would have been something that would have been.
But he can't.
I'm not loving Trump
because he's part of the problem.
he's part of the
It's
problem.
exactly the same reason
Well,
why Congress won't actually go after Trump for the real crimes that he's committed. It's because they commit the same crimes. They're all complicit. And
so he is a war criminal for continuing wars in Yemen and Syria, et cetera, but he hasn't started new wars, right? I mean, so he seems like, you know, the devil on his shoulder is a little better for us than the devil on the Dem shoulder
In terms of starting new wars.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, Biden's already been doing this talk that they do about like helping the people of Venezuela, right? Where we stand with the people on Venezuela, which means we're going to bomb them.
But they're both together on that, though. They're all together.
Yes, on Venezuela, you're right. Yeah, that's right. And in fact, some of the
things that have happened.
No, you're right about that.
They all stood up and applauded Guaido when he went
That's
to
right.
the what was it, the State of the Union or something?
And some of the attempts to overthrow recently have been, you know, under the CIA. I just don't know whether or not Trump is like has spent 80% of his time with lawyers, and really has to have said, okay, Pentagon, run it. You know, I mean, you have to think that there's a possibility that he's simply distracted, unless you go whole hog on the idea that the duopoly really is just all for show. They're really all in it together. And I could go either way. I'm not sure.
Daisy, I think you're right that it's mainly entertainment. That's why people watched it, and that's how Trump approached it. You know, as a talk show host, basically trying to rile up the crowd. Yeah, except when he got elected, also on some policy issues, which he was fairly consistent on in 2016, which he's not really repeating in 2020. So it seemed to me Trump was just doing whatever he could do. He wasn't focused on policy. He was focused on just being a rabble rouser and getting support for just like kind of like going against the grain, for like being the one who's basically saying this is a farce and this, I don't take this seriously, and then, you know, Biden's the polite whatever establishment candidate. And this is, you know, gets into the populist versus anti-populism. And I think Trump is a true populist. He's really a demagogue, in the sense that he'll say whatever he has to say to whatever group to get their support. So he's not necessarily consistent. He's more about building his brand and building his charismatic support than any particular policy. It's just a kind of a vague anti-swamp establishment agenda. But other than that, I mean, he never followed through on the things he campaigned on in 2016. So that's,
yeah. And he was definitely lazy again with continuing the that, you know, Biden is just a front for the Bernie left kind of stuff, right? That really, as soon as they get in, they're gonna, you know.
I mean, that's a weak punch that, of course, he's gonna come out with. But the thing is that he has to. I feel like he was being boisterous, right? He was being this like character, what was expected of him, really, ultimately, right? But it's because of the fact that this time around, you can actually hold him to account. Last time, he wasn't a politician. There was no record to hold him to account. He campaigned, like you're saying, Steve, that he campaigned on, like, draining the swamp, stuff like that. And it's like, what has actually happened is that he hired the swamp, because look at his cabinet and look at how he's had to rotate through so many people, and a lot of the people that he's put into these positions, they are not even approved by the Congress that they're supposed to be, right? Because they're just replacements for the other person that was fired or left or whatever it may be, and I think in order to be able to kind of skirt that issue and like not keep people looking away from that, well, then he's gonna go and put on the show. I mean, it's so obvious, but unfortunately people are still stuck in this whole left versus right, and this whole, Trump was so rude, like that's ultimately what it comes down to.
I agree with a lot of that, but I also think some of it might have been to throw Biden off his game. I mean, he's pretty easily been riled to anger in some of the campaign stops that he had done before he went under complete isolation, and all of a sudden he's coming back out, and I think going after Hunter and just continuously nagging at him. I think Trump thought he was going to get him to flash out in anger in a way that really looked bad,
Which that's the other thing that I wanted to see. So what did you guys think of Biden's performance? Because I
think he looked like death. When he first came on, and it was like just a visual thing, Trump's like under a heat lamp or something like that, right? But he did look not like death. And then Biden was pale and looking down. I thought he looked horrible.
Well,
but I got over that after we got into it, and I wasn't thinking that the whole way through. But
he couldn't think on his feet. I kept thinking, if I were Biden, I'd be like, I would just get up there and say, shut the F up, Donald, or just say something about his, the size of his whatever manhood or something. Do something like really outrageous to get back at Trump. Use the same technique against Trump, or in a more measured way. But I just thought, like, trying to be polite to Trump, and he did tell
him to shut up once.
He did tell him to won't you shut up, and that got headlines, right, when he said that. But that was like the most.
And he called him a clown.
He fought back.
Yeah. And he did make some comments, again, it was kind of under his breath about, well, this wasn't very presidential. This isn't very presidential, is it? Or something like that.
Or he said this segment wasn't productive.
That's his campaign. I'm going to be presidential like George W. Bush. I'm going to be presidential. So like,
now see, okay, so I'm going to go against the grain here, okay? And I'm going to say I actually think that Biden performed pretty well. I think it's maybe because I had such low expectations of him.
Oh, well.
Like, I mean, because you just never know what you're going to get. But I knew that he was going to be, I'm sure he was hawked up on something, but he actually was pretty coherent. Like, he had his moments where he may have flubbed or whatever, but for the most part, the way that people are portraying this image of like Sleepy Joe and that he's like, decrepit and that he has dementia and all this stuff, this wasn't a dementia person, or a person with dementia. That was not what I picked up. And so I think that this kind of hurt that narrative that I know the Trump campaign is going with, Right,
but if you didn't have the low expectation to start out with, and you came in from, you've been away on the moon for the last 10 years, and you came in and saw this debate, you think these are both really, you have this one outrageous candidate, and then he has this other guy who's just not really putting up a strong defense for himself. And maybe if based on his interviews and his rallies and everything, I mean, you don't expect much from Biden, but and so maybe he outperformed what we expected. But on the other hand, compared to the history of presidential debates, I don't think Biden did that great.
But then you can say the same thing about Trump, that Trump also performed the way that he was expected to perform. That's what I'm saying. We live in this reality where that's how they are. And we have these expectations for, we expect, if like, think about it, if Biden would have acted the way that Trump acted, that would be like, whoa, what the, that would really be out of character from what we expect for Biden to act, because we expect him to be all presidential, blah, blah, blah. right?
But,
but
but
there's
it's so horrific. Just that, I mean, our expectations are so low. I mean, I think back now to
I agree.
like Hillary versus Trump. That was like, you know, Greek orators or something. That was like Greek philosophers compared to this recent debate. And it's horrific that either of these people could be considered, let alone, you know, going to win the president.
Right. Trump is just outrageous. I mean, I don't know what the comparison is with Trump. I mean, you know, maybe William Jennings Bryan or something from 100 some odd years ago, but not even that though. I mean, there's really no comparison. So he's kind of like, and he just broke all the rules. And so that was like when I watched CNN, the analysis was like, oh, Trump, you know, it was a shit show or whatever. It was terrible. But the Trump supporters, it just reinforced their support for this guy because he's breaking all the rules. That's why they like him, right? And like I was driving through a suburb of Boston yesterday, and there was like a Trump parade. You know, like all these cars with big Trump flags and with their headlights flashing and waving Trump banners and everything. And his support, you don't see that for Biden. I mean, I've seen a few more Biden signs in the last few weeks, but they're understated little lawn signs. That's it.
I mean, I've seen a few Trump things here and there, but mostly up here in Salem, it's mostly Harris Biden.
Okay, well
and I'm going to call it Harris Biden because that's really the ticket.
Yeah. I've all of a sudden seen like a flood of Biden tickets, like it was a very concerted effort by, you know, the Biden campaign to say we need to get visibility out there. We're going to call long-term Dems and say you got to put this on your lawn or something, because it's always in very upscale neighborhoods and.
So, do you think the debate made any difference?
Yeah, I think Trump lost a little support.
Really, you think so?
Well, I mean, I don't know whether or not you can trust polls, but I'm seeing some of the polls saying that. I'm seeing like the betting. I have more faith in those betting sites, and there's one on Real Clear Politics that takes like 6 or 7 online betting sites, and does a meta poll from that, and it's trending pretty far apart now. That basically Trump's dropping like crazy and Biden's picking up. Yeah, I think it was probably more embarrassing for Trump than it was for Biden, but
I don't think embarrassing is the right word. Yeah. I think it's like, I think for his base, I thought he did a great job. I think, you know, the question is the so-called swing voters that the Democrats are trying to get by, you know, playing to the center. Maybe some of them would have thought this guy is just too outrageous, but I don't think it's going to make a huge difference even in those swing states. Like, you know,
I think it's going to be all about enthusiasm and the effect of COVID and the effect of the bizarre election we're going to have with mail-in votes and all that. I think there's room for either of them to win in there.
But it may all be a moot point because of events that have happened since the debate.
Yeah, so moving on to our next topic.